So this is my All Tomorrow's notebook. If you haven't read All Tomorrow's, you definitely should, because it's a free PDF that you can read on the internet. I wanted to add some sort of disease that was spreading along from the spine of it to all the other panels, which is why the outward ones aren't yet as affected. Shame, this poor fella here, I think, and this guy are the saddest. And then I'll show you why my hand is red as well, is because we have already ruined the first page of the sketchbook, so we don't have to worry about that. This is the first little test guy I ever did. He looks like an angry steak, but I used epoxy on him, so he's cracking. Don't use epoxy. And then this necklace, which I am absolutely going to wear while I am out and about to freak people out. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. And yes, cursed notebook, very good. So this is everything you'd need to make their panels. I have this old makeup palette thing that my friend gave me. I basically just scrape out the dust and use it to make this, which is vegetable oil with eyeshadow slurry. And then here is just like normal vegetable oil. You can use fancy oils, but I'm broke, so I don't have fancy oils. Then I suppose not everyone has a small Tupperware full of blood either, but I was using a lot of it, so oh dear. So I just mixed acrylic paint with some water and with some gloss varnish, which I also use at the end to make it the wet stuff look shiny. And then any kind of glue you want to use. I got this stuff the other day. It's pretty cool, but you can also use super glue. I don't recommend contact glue because just because I'm bad at it, and it always leaves little patches of gooey stuff. Then I've got these doll eyes, but if you don't have doll eyes, you could use like a marble or a bead or whatever these things are, these squashed marbles. These are also cool because you can paint an eye in the back of it and it'll show through and it will look wet. But I like the doll eyes. Then for tools, I have like a scalpel and a lino cutter thing. Then I have this clipper that I just used to pull annoying bits out of the leather. Then we have this pointy thing. I think it's called an embossing tool, but I use it to make horrible rashy rashes. And some paint brushes of various sizes. Also, you'll get oil on them, so then you might not want to use them for regular painting. So these are just some really old ones. Then the leather itself is veg tan leather, so it's quite stiff and it's quite thick. The reason it's all rumply is because I've already gone through the first step of wetting it and then I like crush it. Oh my gosh, my hands look like I have murdered someone. You saw it, officer, it's here, it's fine. And I've soaked them in water already to let them dry. These are actually the same kind of leather. This is from the same piece of scrap leather. I just put tea in the water for this one to make it a bit darker, to get like some variety in skin tone. And then you'll need whatever you're going to stick on the back, because the eyes, you have to have a backing, otherwise the eyes will just fall out. So I'm going to use this cute and adorable easel thing and completely destroy it by making it horrifying. I recommend whatever size you're going to cut the backing to, cut the leather a bit larger because it does shrink and stretch throughout the process. So you probably want to have a bit bigger piece than your actual backing. So this is, in my opinion, the most fun part, because I'm a crazy person, is like figuring out where the eyes will go and then cutting additional wounds into them. You can see this one I picked up with one of my murder hands, and it's got a bit of red on, but it doesn't matter because it will become some sort of horrible disease later. So I'm going to do this one like actually about here, Use a cutting mat. I've got a cork board. And then I like to cut them small at first because they will stretch later on. But you want to make sure you can see the eye through it at least. So this one I'm going to cut the edges a little bit more. And I think that will be enough for now, because you can always cut it more, but you can't cut it less. And we're going to have to do a couple extra steps where we wet the leather and it'll stretch that way. So correspondingly, on this one, I like that this piece of leather already had a flaw in it. So I'm going to make an eye around about there, same size as the other one. And then this is a good time while it's dry to cut bits out of it. So, but I don't like to cut all the way through. I am going to try cut all the way through for one of these to see if I can make it look like a hole all the way through. But if you don't want to cut all the way through, this is why you want a thicker veg tan leather, is you just sort of cut sideways. And then you can see where that gives you a little flap to continue on with. So I usually just try to cut sideways the other way along that edge. The nice thing about skin is that it's all sort of asymmetrical and flawed anyway. So it doesn't really matter if you make mistakes. So this we'll deal with later, but you want to be able to sort of fold it along that crease to get some paint in later. And then this one I said I am going to cut a hole all the way through, because like maybe we'll put some pus in it or something. Who knows? Who knows? And then, you know, you can always add more later. I like to do it before I soak the leather so that it has time to soak into the grooves. So I'm just going to do a couple more. This is where this tool comes in handy, because you can take large chunks out of it like that. Or regular toenail clippers, I suppose, but I like these. And that's enough for this little guy. Shame, poor fella. Same thing over here. I'll do this one as well, and then I will soak them and come right back. So this is the same leather, just wet. And the reason why I've scrunched it into these little balls is partly to wring out the water. And partly because you get these very nice creases, human skin lines in it, if the more you distress it. So you can be really quite rough with the poor little fellas. So then, once you've sort of got it to your liking, you see where the eye was there. We are just going to push down on the actual eye itself and like open it somewhat. This is why the leather needs to be wet, because it needs to be flat in the parts where it should be flat, and be a little eyelid here where it needs to be an eyelid. Same with this guy. And this is a good place to go in with some leather tools like this embossing tool. I mentioned earlier it's got a thin part and a thick part. And I generally just put in some more dents, because the more lines you have around the eyes, the more realistic it is. You see why now I didn't cut it larger, because it naturally does stretch. And there you've got a nice little realistic-y sort of eyelid shape. This guy's going to have teeth, I think. And you can sort of scratch it in places, because wherever you scratch it, you can add stuff later. You know, additional... There we go. He looks quite distressed. Same over here. I think this guy's going to have, you know, a slightly more horrifying eyelid disease because he got paint on him. But yeah, any additional, if you want to do, I think for this guy we'll do a little rash around this hole. So if you want to do it, now's the time to go in with the pointy end of the stick. I can try to do it so you can see, but basically it's easier if I hold it like this and just make stabbing motions. But basically the more holes you have, the better, because they won't look so disparate. So what I like to do is do a lot of it right in the middle of where the rash is starting. And then as you go out, spread it around a bit more. And this is also something you can do in the later stages as well. But I just like to do it while it's wet, because I think it adds that additional depth to it. This guy probably will make a couple more holes around here. And then the annoying part about this is that you kind of have to wait ages for them to dry, because as you see, they've turned a completely different color. They've gone a bit bigger because they're stretched out, and they will shrink again once they're dry. So you really want to make sure all the dryness is gone before you start on the second step. So goodbye, my lovelies. I will see you later. I came back because one thing you can do while they're still wet, depending on how much you want it to like bleed into the surrounding area, is now is a good time to put some terrifying blood mixture into your little guys. So I like to take the smallest paintbrush that I have. This is mixed with water, so it is actually more liquidy than acrylic paint would be. And I like that because it seeps into the edges. So even if you've had 3 cups of coffee today like me, and your hands shake like crazy and you make mistakes, it doesn't matter, because you can just sort of rub it in, and then later on enhance those details. Every mistake you make is still an organic mistake on a creature that is ultimately organic. So don't be worried if you can't get it in a straight line, but you know, as far as you can, keep it inside the bit that you've cut. Here's another one here. So I'll just take it and dribble it in. And then what I'll do, oh dear, what I will do is I will do the opposite with this one. I'll wait until it's dry, and then I'll add the blood so you can see what the difference is. For the little holes, I just kind of like to rub it in at first. Oh dear. Oh, this poor chap. And then I like to take my stabby thing and dip it in the paint and enhance the holes that way. Like, because if you get it deeper in, it will look, you know, the right amount of sunken places versus raised places. So there is one poor, terrifying, destroyed guy with lots of wounds. And this guy, I think, will be a little bit more just like a face. So before I go away again, I'll just make sure that the eye is good and that it dries like that for the next little while. So I'm back. It's the next day. My hands are mostly clean. And here are the 2 little guys. They're much stiffer now, and that they're completely dry. Just pop this piece of paper under, because now we're going to apply oil to it. I have the paint brushes I'm going to use with the makeup. Here I've mixed some with oil already because this is my most common color. Here's some plain oil. I keep the paint brushes I'm going to use with the oil on the right, and some wet wipes in case I mess up, which I often do. So here are our 2 guys, and I'm going to take the oil that's mixed with makeup, grab some of that on the paintbrush and do the eye. Now, like, don't freak out because it's going to look super dark, but that's just the oil being absorbed into the leather. What I'd like to do is paint the dark parts first, the parts that are going to have the most definition. And then now's a good time to add to these creases some oil as well. You want it to like really soak in there. Once the oil is absorbed in the leather, the pigment usually remains. And once again, don't worry about getting little smudges on it, because that's also very organic and it will absorb. It will look completely different in the end. But I do like oiling all the creases, even if I've already done them with blood, because any additional pinkness around the edges is going to work out like really great. So here I'm just letting it absorb into the holes, and I'll probably go back there with some paint as well. Wherever there's already some smudges, I'm going to cover that with the oil first, and then I'm going to go back over it later. So this one hasn't got any, you know, gory bits yet, but I'm planning on giving him some teeth. So I do want the inside of his mouth to look realistic. And I'll come back once I'm done with this one, and we'll do the whole panel. So this guy's got his features now. Then the other thing that I like to do is go with a slightly bigger brush, same oil mixture, and go along the edges, because that makes them look a bit like shriveled around the edges in a cool way. You see, it looks like it's going to be bad and like way too dark, but actually once it is absorbed, it's going to look really nice. And you can do that just with your thumb as well, sort of massage it in. So now these guys, I've used the pigmented oil. Now I'm going to take just plain vegetable oil and a much larger brush, and make sure I'm not using too much, because this is where the creases are going to stand out. If you just sort of lightly brush over the top, it really does look like they're going to become, you know, a whole different thing. But I'll come back in a couple of hours, and it will have soaked in really nicely. This guy is not going to be as bleedy, so we can just, don't worry if it doesn't get in the cracks. That's actually going to come out way better. So now we have our slightly shiny dudes. I'm going to let that soak in for about 2 hours probably, and then come back, and you'll see they look vastly different. Now, it is possible to put too much oil on, and may I introduce you to this sad bacon who I definitely did. I put too much of this kind of oil on him and didn't restrict it to just the edges, and I didn't use enough plain oil. So if you don't want a sad bacon, you could always put more on. You know, you can't take it off, so do more layers if you want. He will definitely become something at some point, because I still think he's kind of delightful. So it hasn't fully soaked in because it's only been an hour or so, but you can already see the difference. I just have to get this done so I can clean the kitchen before I go to bed, because it's late at night. These teeth were an impulse buy at 3 a.m. I love them. It's going to be brilliant. I just put them in there for testing, because we still have stuff to do with this guy. But I think it's going to be good. In the intervening time, I also used the embossing tool to poke some more blood into the depths. And then I'm going to put some paste in there to make it look like it's oozing. So now that the leather has oil on it, what I like to do is use the makeup as you would use, I guess, regular makeup. Just to like shade things a bit pinker where there's visible wounds in the flesh. So like around the eyes, I like to make it a bit darker, and also around the rashy places and around the lips. I'm using this reddish color, but really anything will work, because you are going to put more oil on it anyway. This is just to make the flesh around the wound look more distressed and organic, because the paint by itself looks quite bright, and we can always add more paint later. And then around the edges, maybe just shade in a bit where there should be, you know, more vibrant flesh. So this guy already looks a lot better. And the thing that I like to do, and this is why it was cool to crease it earlier, is you see it'll have these sort of natural creases in it. So I like to take this time to go through. I mean, there's a bunch of crackles around here, so I'll usually just sort of enhance what's already there. Maybe some shading around the eyes. People have wrinkly eyes. It's great. I think plastic surgery makes people less interesting and unique to draw and stuff. But yeah, there are some, and ooh, there we go. And in those, I'll probably just dab a bit more of the makeup, maybe a lighter, get it inside of the creases. People's skin tones are wildly variable, actually, and the more little imperfections you can put in, the more realistic it looks, which is, I guess, why people get a bit uncanny valley when they try to fix every flaw that they have. I personally like it. So this guy looks a lot more weathered now. And what I'll probably do is go over this. This brush still has oil on it, but only a little, because I don't want to get all the way in. If you need to spread it out, you can put it on your hand like that. So this is the second coat of plain oil that I'm applying, again from the edges outwards. And that's where I'll probably leave it in terms of oil, and let it really soak in. And try not to let him become bacon guy. This guy, I don't really want him to have so many wounds per se. I got a little bit of red paint on him. And I'm going to put more red paint in there eventually. So I do want to like make sure the edges are quite realistic. So this is, this was where I'm doing the oil first and putting the makeup on after, because that's also pretty cool way to do it, because you have sort of more control. I'm not good at makeup, and that's why, but if you are, then like you probably would want to do it this way, because you can make sure that you get it exactly where you want it. I'm not great at painting stuff. I think his lips should be a bit more defined and a bit more red, probably pink. And then so here are the sort of like spots with him, I guess, where you can see like all the detail on the leather, and I'll just be enhancing that, especially around the lips, because that'll give him, you know, more puckered lips, like a realistic human being. So, and I want to make it obvious that those are actually lips and not just a slice in the leather. Oh, he's gonna look great. And the creases that people have in the corners of things, like this mouth will, and these eyes. And the more leather you put in, the more detail you're going to be able to get with embossing. So I would say this is the last bit of oil that I'm going to put on these chaps. I'm going to put some more makeup in these creases, and then I'm going to really let them dry and clean up the kitchen and come back tomorrow. So it's very late in the night. I've cleaned my kitchen, and the last thing I'm going to do before I go to bed is just add some blood to these guys. I'm going to try not to spill because it gets everywhere. But basically, the idea is just to get it in the little holes as much as you can. If you're going to add spots like this, if you think you've done it a bit too much, you can give it a bit of a finger or a baby wipe. but then remember which parts of your baby wipes are clean. And then, there we go. I'll deal with that later. Then inside of the wounds, again, if you make a mess, you're going to be fine. And I'm just going to fill that in a little bit more than it was. And I've made some spots around here as well, just so he can be good and disgusting. And then the last step is, if you want to make the eyes a bit red and bleedy, you can. I'm going to do it on this one, but not on the other one. And I like to do it in the crevices as well of the eye. It looks a bit much at the moment, so I'll give it a gentle sort of wipe around and then add some more just on the edge. Now, when the paint dries, it's not going to be shiny like it is now, which is why we'll go back in and add some varnish. This guy, I think I'm just going to add a bit less. They say less is more. Who knows? And then I decided earlier on that I was going to fill in that crack a bit. The other cracks, I put some makeup on, and I sort of shredded him more around the mouth. Ooh, actually, I feel like this is a good spot. And I think inside the mouth should be quite red. And then I think later on, perhaps I'll do some little drips coming down from the corner of his mouth. I like that leather's organic. You can just sort of, it will seep in the water, so you can rub it with your hands. Now this guy, I don't think I'm going to do as much around his eyes, so this paintbrush is quite fairly dry, and I'll just sort of dry brush it around there. And then later on, I will make his inner eyes a bit more brown. Dry brushing is quite effective when it comes to it. If you just want to get some, whoops, okay, that clearly wasn't dry. If you just want to get a bit more generalized color on the outside. So I am going to leave these dudes until tomorrow morning. But before I do, I think I am just going to put a little bit more oil on them, because I am going to bed. And I think it'll be mostly where I want the color to blend in, like the red that I've just put down here. If I add some more oil, it'll just accentuate that. And for this guy, I think maybe also a little bit around the eyes. Humans are naturally darker around the eyes. But yeah, and then any edges that you feel like could use some attention. So I'm going to leave these guys to dry. I'm going to tidy everything up, and I'm going to come back tomorrow. Okay, so it's the next day, and I hope the audio is okay, because I'm in the shed and there are like 6 million frogs outside being their froggy selves. So this is just a clear water-based varnish that I got at the art store. You can use any kind. So they've dried out quite a bit, and you see where the coloring is much more subtle now. So now but since the paint is dried, all the spots that are wet, theoretically wet, need to look a bit glossy, and so that's what we're going to do now. Just painting it inside of the woundy parts. And also the insides of the eyes, like the inner eyelids and stuff. And then for this, what I'll probably do is, before I varnish it, bits it's not, they shouldn't all be one size, the whole, so I'll probably just do this to give it a bit of variation, and then put some gloss on there as well. Ooh, we're leaking. And on the patches where it shouldn't be so shiny, I like to rub it in with my fingers, because then it goes into the depth of the hole. And of course, any little sprinkle you've got going on could do with a bit as well. And I'm going to fill this crack in too. The varnish looks white, but it's definitely going to dry clear, so don't worry about that. Like, the more the better, the wetter the better. So I'm going to do the other one as well and come back once they've dried, and we can put the eyes in. And there you go, you're basically done. You can obviously keep adding details. For example, in the future, I'll probably make the edges a bit more brown, and you can go back in with the makeup and oil wherever you want. For example, I will probably make this more pinkish flesh tone later on. But they usually want to, obviously, the book is glued down to the cover of the book, so you can't see the eyes at all. But and since I'm not sure what I'm going to do with these guys, I have just attached it with a piece of painter's tape at the back, and then whatever you glue it down to, it should still stick. Just leave the piece of tape in place. The other thing that I'm excited about is I made a hole in this one for a reason. I have this is the glue that I'm using, but I think that if I just sort of smoosh this in the hole from the other side, we're going to get a nice, oh yay, a little bit of a pus effect. I think what I'll do as well, I'm going to squeeze a bit more on, but I think I'm going to go back in later and like color that maybe yellow and maybe make some other holes. Let's see, this is my first time trying this, and it's supremely gross. Yay. I think by itself it might be not enough, but I'm going to go back in, try this again in another couple ones, and see how it looks. So this guy, I guess I have my little easel that he can sit here in my workshop and wait to be made into something else. This one I actually do have a plan for, because he's going to have teeth. And then I found this the other day and was like, what if instead of this delightful scene, we open on the real tooth fairy being a guy with teeth? But that's for another time. But yes, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope it inspires you to make many creepy little guys of your own. And also my friend said I should show you a picture of the shed, because it looks, in his words, incredibly sus. But yeah, I'm really happy. I'm just setting this up as a studio. Bit of a mess over there, but hopefully this means I can make more stuff in the future. Next step, string doll tutorial.